Mm. All right. Hello, everyone. Uh, I'm Jack Murphy. I'm going to be the panelist here, guiding everyone. Our two great speakers, which we'll talk about in a second. I'm one of the students working for K-State, doing a master's in uh, urban soil specifically, so agronomy, and I'm doing the urban food systems to help out. And today we're gonna be talking about well, welcome to Gaining Ground. Welcome here. Uh, and so a little bit about the series. This was organized by the Urban Food System Graduate Cohort, and this is to provide agricultural educators with tools and skills to better support urban food system enterprises. And we're going to talk specifically about topics or skills that support urban food system enterprises and programs. And this is funded by the North Central SARE PDP under a project titled The Capacity Building in Urban Food Systems in the North Central Region. And now, specifically, we're going to be talking about free tools for small growers from interactive guide to open source software. And today we're all going to discover how to integrate these resources into your work to better meet the needs of urban and small scale growers. And now for our two speakers today, we have Dr. Hannah Whitman, who's a professor in the Institute for Resources, Environment, and Sustainability and Land and Food Systems at the University of British Columbia. And then we also have Dr. Sam Wortman, who's the associate professor in the Department of Agronomy and Horticulture in the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, and is the founder of the Grow Local Innovation Lab. Oh, and for Dr. Whitman, I almost forgot to say, the project lead for Elite Farm, which we will discuss. Mhm. And yeah, I will be here uh, take to look over the Q&A section. So everyone just please put stuff in the Q&A box and we'll have a Q&A at the end. But now it'll be Dr. Whitman's time to shine.
Great. Thanks so much for having me. I have relatives in Wichita, so it's nice to be back there, even if it's just a virtual visit for now. I'm actually calling in from Brazil today. I'm visiting some projects I have here as well. So I guess I'll just get started. So I grew up on a family farm in northern Idaho. I have relatives farming all over the US and kind of have been studying holistically different ways that diversified farms, so small scale or medium scale, but farms that are really growing, more than just the top five commodity crops. How are they doing in their sustainability from economic sustainability, economic viability, but also we look a lot at environmental and social sustainability. So this is our urban farm at the University of British Columbia. We have about 8 acres in organic fruit and vegetable production and grow about 200 different crop varieties. We have a lot of urban education and environmental programs happening in our farm. And when I stepped into the director role of our farm about 10 years ago, I found a real lack of consolidated record keeping, which, matched a lot of what I found among smaller scale and diversified farms globally in my work that I do with farming organizations all over the world. And so we started thinking about how could our demonstration farm actually, we're showing how to grow things. Researchers are testing new methods. We're doing a lot of, crop rotations and sustainability research, but the data for that, all those activities wasn't easily accessible in a holistic way. And as we started to talk to diversified farmers, they really also didn't have tools that were kind of adapted or oriented to their diversified needs. So, we started looking at, well, how are farmers keeping records? And they're using all kinds of scattered software. They are keeping crop plans in Excel or Google Sheets, different tabs. They're keeping to-do lists in different tabs. I work a lot with farmers in Latin America, and frankly, farmers in the US do this too. We keep records in notebooks and we make lists of to-do, and all of that information is actually telling us a lot about farmer decision making. It's telling us about what are the relationships between different agricultural practices and different outcomes that we're interested in, whether that's environmental or social or economic. But yet it's really hard to kind of consolidate that data and use that for kind of evidence-informed decision making or broader analyses of sustainability. So this is some examples of some farmers that we work with in Latin America that do organic certification. So they have to draw a farm map every year. They also fill out forms for different kinds of certification, whether it's organic certification or payments for ecosystem services. Here in British Columbia, we work with our organic farming sector for their organic certification records, and it's a lot of data entry. So farmers are often transferring information from one program to another, one notebook to an Excel sheet, an Excel sheet to an online platform. And so they often aren't taking advantage of programs they're eligible for simply because of the kind of bureaucracy of multiple data entry. So our research group, which really includes a large range of different kinds of disciplines, we have ecologists, computer scientists, soil scientists, nutritionists, um, ecologists. We're all interested in different ways in understanding farming system sustainability. Farmers are really interested in understanding their cost of production and having some decision support. They're also really interested in sustainability reporting, and they're really interested in data sovereignty and privacy. So farmers have a lot of concerns about a lot of kind of reporting and record keeping requests that they have, especially from government, especially if they're concerned if it's going to impinge on their kind of autonomy as a farmer to make their own decisions. And then from a research context, as I've already mentioned, we're really interested in holistically understanding farming operations to be able to better understand the trade-offs in farming system outcomes. We want to create evidence base for better decision making. And then we want to have a way to kind of track long-term the resilience of agroecosystems and nutrition in the face of climate change. So how do we understand where farmers are at, and then how do the actions that they take affect their climate resilience? So we were looking for tools to sort of, test at UBC Farm, and to be able to do this, didn't find tools that were appropriate for kind of small scale diversified growers. So what we were finding were the precision ag tools, which are attached to hardware, really oriented around productivity analyses only for the major commodity crops, and really very little that was appropriate for small scale diversified fruit and vegetable farmers, which is kind of our main kind of set of collaborating farmer organizations we were working with at the time. And I had some really smart students, and they said, "Well, we'll just create our own app." And as a university, we have we're a public university. We have a mandate to support public engagement, public service, and so we got some seed funding from the university and released the first version of the app right during the pandemic in 2020, and kind of have been working on it, building it ever since with a number of collaborators. So I want to shout out to a project we have in Latin America with 10 different farming organizations in 7 different countries, and they're all doing organic or agroecological certification processes. So they have been keeping records for that, and we've been using them, using that partnership to kind of co-design Light Farm to be user friendly and to be really adaptable to really diverse farming contexts. You can use it for commodity crops, but mainly we find most of our users are kind of more peri-urban or diversified fruit and vegetable farmers. And those are some of the kind of things that those farmers were interested in measuring. So they want to know about labor, they want to know about challenges, they want to know about their productivity, they want to know about their agrobiodiversity, and sort of some of the environmental values that we've been talking about. So I'll just do a little quick show and tell of what the app does, and then so you can find it at www.lightfarm.org. So it's a web app. You can open it up on any device, whether it's your phone or your tablet or your computer. It's available in 8 languages. So if you have people that speak Spanish as their first language, or French, English, we have German, Portuguese, and 3 Indian languages, so Punjabi, Hindi, and Malayalam. So those are kind of the languages we chose based on the relationships we have with different farming groups. You can log in. I just want to show that even though we only have a few kind of like curated research projects, we've had really impressively surprising independent adoptions. We've had lots and lots of farmers find us online and start, they create their own accounts. It's a free open source resource, and they have started using it for their own purposes. So quite a lot of adoption in the US, even though we don't have any active research projects in the US, which has been interesting. You can see all the code here on our GitHub. So again, we're what we call a digital public good. So we have a lot of volunteer open source contributors. We have a team that works directly with us to quality control that code and to kind of build out the app in a way that has had benefits for features that maybe we don't have funding to build, but user groups want. And so they have kind of the ability to come in and build stuff, which then benefits the broader user base. So in summary, it's a free and open source web app. We offer a wide range of features that help understand ecological, economic, and social sustainability of farms. The kind of base is the farm map. So we're integrated with Google Earth. You can find your location and start to draw your fields and your locations. Here's a map of some of our farms in Brazil, where I am now. So you can have multiple roles and permissions. So you can create a farm account. A farm manager, a farm owner is the owner of that farm account. That manager or owner can invite other people to come into the account, so other users, and those users could be workers, extension agents, researchers. That farm owner owns all the data related to that account. So as people come and go, we find this a lot in community farms, family farms, farms that have hired workers. Everybody's filling in the farm account with data of their day-to-day activities, with their crop planning and task lists. If those workers leave or those members leave, that data stays with the farm. So the farmer starts to build a long-term monitoring database where they can start baselining activities and have multiple people contribute to adding data to the farm account. We find that sometimes in research contexts, we'll have our students do the first onboarding, and then that makes it easier for farmers to keep going after that. So you can create crop plans. So a crop plan is a specific variety in a specific place over a specific period of time. So if you have a perennial crop, like say a small blueberry field, that would be one crop plan and it would just never end. And you would just schedule your harvest every year. You'd schedule your annual pruning as tasks within that farm plan, within that crop plan. If you are growing 20 plantings of lettuce, that would be 20 crop plans. But once you get your crop plan, set the way you want it, you can duplicate it. So you're not having to data entry 20 times all of the details of your crop plan. So, depth of planting, timings of expected harvest, etc. So that gets automatically advanced in your calendar, and it sets up a set of automatic tasks, which might be, scouting, cleaning, harvesting, transplanting, whatever. Okay. Managing livestock. So we have just a beta of livestock that came out in December. So you can track animal movements and animal inventory. We have creating and assign tasks. So as I mentioned, when you create a crop plan, a number of standard tasks are, automatically created according to that crop plan. But you can add any number of extra tasks that you want. You can assign those tasks to other users in your farm account. And as a user, I would log in and I would see a list of tasks assigned to me, like weed carrots in field 5 or fix fence on the north boundary. And those can be quite specific and customized to any kind of farm situation. We have a finance model that's in kind of its first version where you can keep track of your income and your expenses and kind of start to automatically calculate your profit and loss, your cost of production. And then we also have a feature where you can export information related to certification. So right now we have the BC organic certification, you can just push this button, export, and it will export the information required for BC organic certification in the format that our local certifier wants that. So there's a quick question. Can you calculate time spent on tasks and the hourly cost of that? Absolutely. So whenever you complete a task, you can quickly document how long that task took. And as you're logged in as a user, it's clear who did that task. Users can be assigned an hourly wage. You can also, we have a lot of volunteers on our farm, and so they don't get an hourly wage, but it's important to us to know how much time they spent. Can it replace QuickBooks? It could. We don't have as many features as QuickBooks, but we're continuing to refine our finance module. One of the things that QuickBooks does is it can generate kind of profit and loss reports or tax reports for the US context. We don't have that yet, but it's definitely on our radar. So I'm happy to talk about that in the Q&A period. So I think I just mentioned yield and productivity analysis, kind of trying to dig down into, again, cost of production, especially for diversified fruit and vegetable farms. It's a way to track the productivity and the profitability of specific, sorry, I lost track looking at the questions here, specific varieties of crops, or, should I grow lettuce or should I grow rutabaga? You can kind of start to create those analyses for yourself. Features in the pipeline. So we do have an irrigation module now. We have a next stage irrigation module coming out this summer where it's integrated with soil sensors. So a lot of people are starting to use smart irrigation, and so we're wanting to serve that kind of functionality request. We're working in Soil Health 2.0, which I'll speak a little bit more about, and we have a new project just starting this summer on starting to push out to e-commerce and retail integration spaces. Again, kind of looking to the open source world for that. So we have a collaboration with Open Food Network and also with something called Market Organic, where farmers can choose to push their profile onto these discovery platforms according to what practices or what products they have and want to put onto those platforms. Again, it's all kind of a farmer push data sovereignty model where none of this information goes anywhere unless a farmer decides to send it there. So smart irrigation, so we have pivots now. We also have drip irrigation kind of functionality to see that. Soil Health 2.0. So right now you can keep track of all of your soil amendments and soil inputs that we have already done. And so we're working on soil sampling and soil analysis record keeping. So you can actually start to keep your soil records in the app and attached to your specific fields and your specific crop planting history in those fields. So these are just some mock-ups of what those new functionalities will look like. So soil sampling, setting your soil goals, eventually trying to work with some recommendation platforms in AI to think about, how can we also provide some decision support opportunities for farmers, even if we're not there on the ground. And then we also have a group of data science students working on data dashboards and data visualizations. So for groups and organizations that want to kind of support and benchmark farmers within their organization, farmers can sign up to a group and they can agree to sort of share their data within that group. And they can kind of, through kind of different permissions and privacy, structures, be protected to be able to do that more localized benchmarking and comparison with peer groups through the dashboard. We have another project where we're pushing data. Farmers can choose to push data from Light Farm into greenhouse gas emissions model. So we're doing one this summer with Coal Farm Tool and one with the HOLOS model, which is the Canadian greenhouse gas emissions model. So this is something around sustainability reporting that a lot of farmers are starting to get interested in. And there's a number of kind of payments for ecosystem services opportunities that farmers are interested in accessing those. This is a way that they can more easily produce those calculations and records to be able to participate. Biodiversity assessment, we have an integration with iNaturalist, or the Global Biodiversity Information Facility. So iNaturalist, eBird, Merlin, there's quite a few different citizen science biodiversity observation tools out there. Those tools push biodiversity observation data into the Global Biodiversity Information Facility, and that information is all georeferenced. If there are biodiversity observations in your field or your farm, those can be visualized within the app. So it's just kind of a nice way to again bring that feedback back to the farmer about biodiversity, and also provide a way, if they're doing biodiversity observations, again, to bring that back into their farm analysis. You can read our data policy. The data collected through Light Farm belongs to the farmers and is used only for non-commercial research initiatives that support food security, environment, and the farming community. We want to really stress that we don't sell data. We don't share any data for any kind of purpose other than anonymized public serving agricultural research. So that's a key distinction of our app from a lot of the commercial apps that are out there. And I think I'm just about time. So what's next? We're collaborating with a number of other open source networks and ag tech initiatives, including the Open Team Network, which works a lot in the United States. And we're we're working on sharing resources and trying to co-build an open ag tech ecosystem that can really support the long-term sustainability of what we're calling nonprofit digital public goods. So that's my time, I think. I don't know if you want me to answer some of the questions now or wait till after the next talk.
I think we can wait at the end of the next talk.
Okay.
And thank you so much for your presentation. And just as a reminder to everyone, there's a little Q&A section. I see some in chat, but if you go like to the lower control panel, I think it's under like more. If you click on that, you'll see the Q&A box where you could add questions. I believe that's what I see on my side, at least. So yeah, feel free to just keep putting in questions, everyone. And yeah, so on our next speaker, Dr. Wortman, and I hope everyone's excited.
Okay. Can you see my slides okay here, Jack?
Yes, I can see it, and we can hear you too. So
Okay, let's get going. Yeah, so happy to be here. I'm Sam Wortman at the University of Nebraska, and was asked to talk about free and low-tech tools for small growers that we've developed in our Grow Local Innovation Lab. And I'll highlight a few, but I'll spend the most time talking about the vegetable variety navigator. All right, so just a few examples of how we're helping farmers solve technical problems. Part-time farmers are struggling with pest management issues. And so one example is we've been working with Yazidi refugee farmers with a nonprofit organization here in Lincoln, Nebraska called Community Crops. And we got a SARE partnership grant with them to try to tackle, at the beginning, was a weed management problem. So this is a group, there was about 7 to 10 farmers, and these are part-time farmers, mostly farming on evenings and weekends while they juggle other part-time and full-time jobs. And the big problem that they were having was that they were spending most of their time when they visited the farm weeding. And so we tried to set up an on-farm trial with them where we looked at just different types of mulches to really cut back on time spent hand weeding. So we had some farmers that were doing paired comparisons with kind of no mulch and wood chips and straw mulch. You can see in number 2. Number 3, we had some farmers using tine weeders and then these reusable geotextile fabrics. And what we found was that there was 3 or 4 growers that used these geotextiles, um, and they loved these because it really eliminated all of their weed management problems, right? In a lot of my research, I focus on bio-based alternatives to plastic. So I struggled with this a little bit because the growers were so excited to have this weed management solution that the next year we came back and they all wanted to use this geotextile. So they are reusing it, which is good. But really it solved a unique problem for them, which was just that they didn't have time to hand weed like they used to. And so this really made their farming endeavors more sustainable. So once we solved that weed management problem, then they started asking questions about flea beetles. The two main crops that they grew were eggplant and peppers, and flea beetles were wiping out the eggplant in particular, and the peppers to a lesser degree, every spring. They had clearly developed some resistance to pyrethroids, so they were using Pyganic every 3 to 5 days without much success. And so the second year, we really just did some paired comparisons of different insect covers. And so this photo here in the bottom left just shows the results of, this is one of those woven, Protect Net is one of the brands, just a woven mesh fabric. We also looked at Agribon, and you can see just the growth differences and the reduction in feeding damage from those flea beetles. So in the course of 2 years, we did about 15 paired trials with close to 20 growers, and really drastically changed some of their practices to reduce the amount of time that they needed to spend cultivating those crops. Okay, another thing to highlight from our group is the problem being we have specialty crop farmers that have been frustrated by growth regulator herbicide damage over the last 5 years or so. And so many of you know that dicamba and 2,4-D use has become more common in soybean and corn, with increased use of dicamba in particular in soybean acres. And the challenge for specialty crop growers, especially small growers, is really trying to link the injury that they see and that they know is happening to yield loss so that they can plan and try to maybe recover damages or really just make decisions about whether they need to replant or whether they can grow that crop to maturity and still get some type of good economic yield from that plant. And so we did some research to look at the injury symptoms at different simulated rates of 2,4-D and dicamba on lettuce and pumpkins. And, we found that visible injury was typically around that 10% range, but we were finding yield loss as low as 1% simulated drift rate, even when visible injury wasn't evident. And then we also did some research to show that you needed to collect those plant tissue samples within 3 to 7 days to get meaningful estimates of the drift rate. So if you do suspect herbicide injury, just really demonstrating how urgent it is to collect that sample, because by day 16, we didn't get any reliable relationship between the dose applied and the dose observed at the lab. Okay, one other project to highlight is what we've done to address the fact that organic growers face exceptional weed pressure in most of their crops, but in particular, densely planted crops. And the reason we wanted to focus on these densely planted crops is because, mulches and weed barriers are not really commonly used in these densely planted crops like loose leaf lettuce and carrot, for example. And obviously that's because the number of planting holes that would be required in the mulch would basically make it impractical or not feasible to use that mulch. It would just be destroyed by the planting operation itself. And, of course, mechanical weeding can be inconsistent depending on crop growth stage, soil conditions, the tool that you're using. So we're finding that while those tools can be part of an integrated management plan, by themselves are usually insufficient. And so particularly in these crops, we see a lot of hand weeding. I've talked to students who come back from working on organic farms in the summer, and they share stories about just how many hours they spend hand weeding carrots alone. And so those stories are motivation for me to find some lower labor solutions to these problems. And so we developed this system and a mulching method where we apply a semi-permeable membrane to the soil. We cover it with some type of substrate to germinate our seeds, in this case compost. We plant our seeds directly into that thin layer of compost, and we irrigate over the top to keep that media wet. And then the crops grow on and through that weed barrier membrane, eliminating the need for any hand weeding or mechanical weed control in those crops. And so we've, in the 2 or 3 years since these original trials, we've commercialized a product called the Root Through Weed Barrier. And this is where I get to put the university sanctioned statement up here that I do have a financial interest in that company, but just want to highlight that as just a way that we're working to find commercialized solutions for growers. Okay, so now I want to talk about the Vegetable Variety Navigator. So the problem that we tried to address with the Variety Navigator is that small growers outside of these really specialized commercial production regions in the US, that might include California, Florida, and some other pockets, Michigan, Texas, for example. But our small growers in places like Nebraska or Kansas, they really have limited access to specialty crop variety performance data. So where are they getting this information currently? Most are getting it from seed catalogs, right? So that's a kind of a favorite pastime for a lot of growers. Once those seed catalogs start coming out in January, you line them up and you start flipping through there to see what catches your eye. And some of the information that you're getting in those seed catalogs is based on some on-farm trials that these companies are doing either at their own research farms or in collaboration with some growers. But they're limited and often not very spatially distributed. That's representative of where their customers are. And if you've read these catalogs, you know that the language they use to describe these varieties is not necessarily evidence-based, right? It's marketing. So other places that growers can access more of the evidence-based information, a great resource for those of us in the Midwest is the Midwest Vegetable Trial Report. This is, I believe, housed through Purdue Extension, but I know extension educators and researchers throughout the Midwest that are contributing on an annual basis to this report. This is a nice aggregation of all the different variety trials that go on across the Midwest. And so in any given year, you might have 5 or 6 different crops with trials from a handful of states, and you can access those individual trials there. Another really nice resource available to growers since I think about 2018 and has really progressed since then is SeedLinked. And SeedLinked, if you haven't seen this, I encourage you to check it out. This provides, kind of a combination of crowdsourced evaluations with variety trial data. And with this tool, growers and participants in these variety trials can enter information, kind of categorical or qualitative evaluations of things like taste and yield and disease resistance. And so when you choose or when you go to find information about a given variety on SeedLinked, you'll see kind of an average of user scores. So it's kind of taking this idea of how we review products online, whether it's through Amazon or whatever, and relying on that previous experience to help us inform how that variety might perform. So that's a nice tool. And really, we wanted to try to answer this question, how do growers make evidence-based decisions about varieties to test on their farm when local unbiased data is increasingly scarce? And so we're trying to kind of find what's the best thing of all these tools, and how can we make it easier for these small growers to access data to make informed decisions about the best varieties for them. All right, so this is kind of what the interface looks like. And at this point, I'm going to try to do a quick demonstration of how the tool might work for you. So let's make sure that works here. All right, so hopefully you're seeing the Tableau interface here. So this is on the agronomy.unl.edu and then just Vegetable Variety Navigator. And the main interface looks like this. The first version of our tool included the ability to navigate 3 crops, broccoli, cucumber, and sweet pepper, and you can explore yield and quality data. And we're in the process. I have a PhD student right now, Jorge Reyes, who is working on expanding this tool to include 3 additional crops at a minimum. So we're hoping to continue growing this to make it broadly useful for diversified vegetable growers throughout the U.S. So if we look at sweet pepper, for example, and we click on yield, I'm going to see if I can zoom in just a hair here so you can see better. So now I can click on variety, and I can explore different varieties, right? So say I look through my seed catalog and I find 3 or 4 different varieties that I'm interested in, and I want to see if the claims made in that seed catalog really apply to me. So I might look down here and say, okay, I want to check out Big Bell pepper. I want to look at Charisma, and when I've got some growers here that like King of the North, and then let's look at Olympus. Okay, so I can choose those 4 pepper varieties. And then I've got a graph here, right? And I've got Olympus, King of the North, Big Bell, and Charisma, and I've got this relative yield potential. So what we did to make this tool was that we took variety trial data from all publicly available data. Some of this was in scientific publications. Some we pulled from that Midwest vegetable trial report. Some we pulled from old SARE reports. Anything that we could find that was from kind of a reputable source that was from a public institution or some other type of non-commercial entity, right? And so we aggregated that and we performed a meta-analysis. And to do that, we had to standardize and we had to remove units because not every variety is present in every trial. And so what we did was we looked at how a variety performed relative to all the other varieties in that trial. And so if you had 10 varieties in a trial and Olympus performed 20% better than the average of all other varieties in that trial, then it got a relative yield score of 20%, as an example. So generally, when we look at relative yield potential, anything above 0 indicates that that variety is better than all the peers that it's typically tested against. Anything less than 0 would indicate that it's a below average performer. Now we recognize there's a lot of variation, so we looked at a 95% confidence interval around the mean. So the center point here in each variety is that kind of that average, but the expected variation we might get are the top and bottom points. So in this case of those 4 varieties, across all locations, we would expect that Charisma is going to be the top performer. Now when I hover over that average for Charisma, you see some information here. One thing we can look for is just how confident we can be in the data. So this relative mean average for Charisma is based on 28 observations from 24 studies. And we can look to see where those studies were conducted. So that little map there with those green dots shows us where the studies were conducted. And the larger the dot, the more site years there were. So the more data we have from that study. The darker green dots are where we have better performance, and the lighter green dots are where we have weaker performance. So if we want to explore that data a little further to see, well, how did that variety, Charisma, for example, perform close to me? So then I can click on this map of studies. And now I can explore these data points at locations that are of interest to me. So now I'm going to just choose pepper on my map. And I'm going to go and I want to look at that Charisma. So I'm going to type in Charisma here. And I want to look at data for just that variety. So I go down to my map here to see where all of the variety trials have been conducted for Charisma. And if I'm here in Lincoln, Nebraska, that looks like the closest variety trial that's been done for Charisma was probably from K-State over here. And when I hover over that, I see that they had 4 site years of data and that the relative yield was 8%. So it was slightly better than all the peers that it was tested against. And the relative quality was also 10% better than those that it was tested against. And if I look at the quality parameters, you can see a list of some of the things that contributed to that estimate of overall quality. And then, you can expand from there. You can look at how did it perform down here in Oklahoma pretty well. Relative yield was 48%. That suggests that it was substantially better than its peers. I can go down here to Southern Illinois and see that it performed well there, 39% above its peers with pretty average quality. And so you can basically make your own kind of analysis to say, what locations here are most similar to where I am. The idea here is we want to try to extrapolate data because it's unrealistic for a grower in Lincoln to expect that every variety is going to be tested in eastern Nebraska, right? So how can we leverage all of this nice data to make decisions about what we're doing here in eastern Nebraska? Okay, so head back to the PowerPoint to finish up here. And we recently conducted some additional variety trials because we wanted to kind of ground truth this vegetable variety navigator to say, how effective is this for making decisions? So what we did was we compared data in this vegetable variety navigator to yields from 3 years of on-farm variety trials that we conducted here in eastern Nebraska for cucumber, sweet pepper, and broccoli. And what we did is we compared each of these strategies for predicting yield with kind of this random threshold. So if I look at a normal distribution of possible performance of a variety and just try to guess how a given variety is going to perform relative to its peers, that's the dashed line. So just by chance, this is how good I could randomly pick winners and losers in a variety trial. So anything below that threshold is an improvement upon random chance. And so you can see that we performed best for pepper. So 1 neighbor, 3 neighbor, and this chart approach, that just means 1 neighbor would be, if I'm in eastern Nebraska, I'm looking at that Kansas data to try to predict how charisma is going to perform. 3 neighbor would say I'm going to look at Kansas, Oklahoma, and Southern Illinois, because those are the 3 closest variety trials to Lincoln, Nebraska. And then this chart would just be the global average of all available data. And so you can see it did well for pepper. The nearest neighbors was better for cucumber. And then with broccoli, we had just generally less predictability. But when we did, it was better for 3 neighbor and that chart approach. Okay, so in my invite email, I was asked to share some advice for collaborative learning with growers. So I'll just end with this. My advice is when working with growers to solve problems, regular 2-way communication is key. Though if you can only pick one, be on the receiving end of that communication. So I think probably the only good advice that Burr gave to Hamilton was talk less, listen more, right? And I think that's good advice for us as agricultural researchers and educators. And I think it's beyond just communicating, it's building relationships, right? So I look at the projects that I've worked on over the last 5 to 10 years, and the best projects are those that we had great relationships with our collaborators. And that's where I think you can have the most impact. I think it's important that we're teaching on-farm testing skills. Increasingly, we can't solve every problem for every grower, but we can teach a lot of growers to do on-farm trials and do them well so that they can start to make some decisions that are appropriate for their farm. And I think it's also important that we're teaching partial budgeting skills and the concept of opportunity costs. And so the example here is those Yazidi growers that I was working with at Community Crops. Several of them were driving for Uber in the evenings and weekends. And so, we had conversations about, what are you giving up in terms of income potential to come here every night and weed for 3 hours? And that's really the value that you should be assigning to that time spent hand weeding. When you're looking at the cost of a geotextile weed barrier, think about how many Uber rides you're giving up because you're here weeding, right? And so I think that's important. I think a lot of our growers undervalue their time because in part because they're enjoying what they're doing, right? They love to farm, they love to grow, but I think it's our role to help them value their time. So with that, I will unshare and hopefully we can have some time for discussion.
All righty. Thank you so much, Dr. Wortman. And now we're in our Q&A section where it seems like there are already quite a few questions for Dr. Whitman. And Dr. Whitman, if you actually could answer some of these live, I can just read them out for you. But since we're
Sure.
recording the webinar, so I guess one of the first questions is, can any export files be uploaded to other certification organizations?
Yeah, so basically every certifier has their own form, and we've done a lot of analysis of this. Most of the forms ask the same thing. And so we've done the proof of concept that we can export pretty much anything that, for example, a USDA certification, organic certification query would want. The question is, will the certifier accept that export? So what we suggest is that people go ahead and export, just choose one of the BC certifiers, export the materials, take that to your certifier and say, will you accept this, or would you like a different format? And if enough people ask for a different format, we can consider building that, or that could be, crowdsourced by the user group to actually build it for themselves.
Okay. And then the next question we have here, let's see if we can. They ask, is there any way to pay workers with the app or connect it to systems to generate pay information?
Yeah, so you can calculate hours using the app, but you can't pay people from the app directly. So what people have been doing is using the app to track hours of different workers, and then just pay them using Venmo or whatever payment form they usually do. But it's
Okay.
not connected with banking information.
Okay. Well, we just got a question for Sam. It says, a lot of our growers manage weeds in high density crops through flushing, tarping. I'm curious how you would identify situations where it's worth it to use root through with additional costs for time plus compost or not. Does it depend on weed pressure, and does it depend on scale?
Yeah, it's a great question. We have growers using flushing and tarping as well. And I think obviously the big trade-off there is also opportunity cost, right? So we require, at least here in Nebraska, if we're doing it in the spring, we need about 6 weeks for really good tarping or solarization, really. And so if we're growing, for example, lettuce or spinach in this type of system, then we've missed our window for production. So that's one consideration. The other thing is that certainly the um, the the suitability of something like root through improves as your weed pressure and intensity goes up, right? So we've done some analyses to look at offsetting hand weeding costs. So the more weeds you have, the more hand weeding you're going to do. So if you've been really judicious about seed bank management and you've got a low weed seed bank, then it's probably not going to be profitable to use a tool like that. But if you have really high weed seed bank and you are spending a lot of time hand weeding, as I've heard, like I mentioned, some of my students have come back to share stories about, that's where it starts to pay to use this. So in terms of the extra compost and compost application, I wish I had it off the top of my head, but we've done some break-even analyses to show just how much time you need to spend hand weeding to where it flips for a mulching solution to be more profitable. So, but yeah, those are all considerations that a grower would have to make.
Another one just came in for you, Sam, too. It is, how many crops and growing zones are covered in your software?
Okay, so right now the only 3 crops we have are broccoli, cucumber, and sweet pepper. We're working on adding right now tomato, which is going to be a big lift because there's so many varieties, but we're working on it. Um, and sweet corn, and then potato is also one, and then I think we're working on lettuce as well. So hopefully in the next couple of years, we'll have twice as many crops up there. And then as far as growing zones, this is actually a global data set. So we've mined the literature for all variety trial data. Most of the studies that we have are from the US and Ontario. But we do have some scattered data that are global. We do on the tool allow people to sort data by soil texture and aridity index, which hopefully accounts for some of that local spatial variation, but we don't have anything by growing zone per se.
And back to Dr. Whitman, someone asked here, like, is Farmlight planning to release an app so we can track our update info with our phones?
Yeah, so it's a web app, which means you can already access it on your phone. Basically, you have to have cell service or Wi-Fi. You can see if you're offline, like if you're in your field, you don't have good cell service in your field, you can still see your map and your lists of tasks. You just can't enter information. But yeah, you should be able to do everything on your phone. Just use Chrome.
And then another question here was, can you provide more info about the group feature in the app? This audience is a lot of extension professionals, and this person thinks that they would be interested in using this app for benchmarking purposes among the growers they work with.
Yeah, this is a really exciting topic that I am personally very passionate about. So there's a couple different ways. One is that some of the groups that we've been working with in our Latin America project, their extension worker is added to each farmer's account. So when you log into Light Farm, I can see I'm a member of 10 farms. And so I can kind of go into this farm or I can go into that farm and I can see what's going on and I can set tasks or say, hey, Sally, you might want to check your field 5 for, this disease that's popping up in the region. So that you can already do. The dashboard that we're working on, right now we have that group benchmarking set up for our specific research groups of farmers. We're working on automating that for other groups. It's not quite ready for public launch, but it's something that if you have a group of farmers that you're working with and want to try some benchmarking, we're definitely looking for user groups that kind of can commit to co-design of this. So if you're interested in that, please just get in touch with me offline and we can talk about it.
Okay. And question for Sam, let's see. Do you collect data through the app for changing management recommendations?
I wonder if that one might be for Hannah.
Oh, yeah.
Let's see.
Because we don't collect
Do you-
any data through our app, so.
So see if I understand the question. So basically, farmers keep track of their own data for their own kind of farm management purposes. And then as a research group, we kind of have this large data set and we use that to sort of understand trends in farming practices. And we're starting to do some modeling around, farm diversification and farm size and those kinds of questions. In terms of recommending management, we don't do that because we're not in a local relationship with those farmers. So kind of going back to Sam's talk about that importance of the two-way communication. So as a kind of a service, as a technical service provider, we're just providing kind of data visualization and data tracking, data record keeping opportunities so that farmers can really talk with their extension professionals about, what does it mean for this data? What does this data mean in my local context? Because this piece of data means something very different in Kansas than it does in Brazil, where I am right now, right? And so that's where like the practice has to be the practice recommendations have to be very carefully curated to the local situation, the local crop, the local climate, that sort of thing.
Okay. This next question is for both of you. What are some success stories or notable feedback you've had from growers with these tools? Whoever wants to start.
Sam, you want to go first?
Yeah, not as much on my end because we're so new. And so really the limited feedback we've had so far is can you add additional crops, right? Because we've only got 3 so far. So that's what we're working on. And then we're always trying to find ways to streamline the data, right? Because I walked you through it and it's not the most straightforward. So we're trying to find the right balance in version 2.0 with how do we make it as easy as possible to use without giving up some of that granularity that we're trying to pass along to growers. So we're still kind of grappling with that.
Yeah, I would say so. We've had some really interesting success with our Latin America. I mean, these are the farmers that we have more day-to-day contact with. And interestingly, it's been the youth in these communities that have been most excited. So what we're finding is in Mexico or even rural contexts in the US, a lot of farmers aren't really using digital tools for record keeping, and it's getting the next generation involved in the farm. One example, we have done some student internships in Mexico with university students and high school students. We give them little scholarships to help families kind of onboard into the app, and a number of them have responded that they kind of have a new way of thinking about farming, that they maybe didn't think they would continue farming with their families, and now because they're able to see kind of cost of production, they're able to work with agroecological certification networks, which are often kind of connected then to urban marketing opportunities. They're able to kind of look at the sustainability questions of the farm. They kind of see more of a I would say, positive pathway to farming. So that's been really interesting just to see the power of data visualization and data record keeping for kind of newer generations of farmers. I think that the cost of production piece and being able to just keep track of tasks has been very important to a lot of our diversified growers, and just, you know, the organizational complexity of these farms is really, really high. And so whatever can be done to reduce the pieces of paper, to reduce the whiteboards, and to actually really attach tasks to specific fields and specific crops is just, you know, managing that complexity on a day-to-day basis has, I think, been helpful for people.
All right. It seems, oh, that's another question just popped in. What are, for either of these, either person, what are some limitations of these tools, and how can educators help bridge those gaps for farmers?
Yeah, this is a really good question. You know, we've been focusing a lot on the limitations of technology. You know, technology is not gonna, it's not gonna solve climate change. It's not gonna make you rich tomorrow. These technologies are meant to sort of help farmers in their day-to-day life take the steps they need to be more profitable, take the steps they need to become more climate resilient. I think a lot of ag tech sort of overpromises and underdelivers. And we've sort of taken the opposite approach. We want to underpromise, and then I think we've actually over-delivered. We didn't think so many people would take up the tool because we've been really slow in our development. We've been really like grounded in trying to understand what farmers need and then build that. Whereas I think a lot of ag tech is venture capital funded. It's like, I want to build something, I want to sell it. Farmers might, you know, onboard, they might spend a lot of time trying it out, and then that tool, you know, goes bankrupt and goes away. And so that farmer has then invested quite a bit of time and energy, and they get frustrated with, again, multiple data entry, multiple onboarding. So one of the things that we're doing is really making sure we're well networked with other open source tools, and not A, replicating resources that are already out there, and B, making sure that, you know, farmers can move their data back and forth between different tools. You know, we're still on the edge of that, but we're starting with the carbon calculators now, and with the e-commerce platforms, as ways that farmers have told us these are the places that they want to move data. In terms of educators bridging the gap, I think um, finding out in a very localized way what farmers need, and then trying to find the right tool for them, and onboarding, you know, helping with the onboarding process. The transition cost is the most difficult thing, of time and like cognitive dissonance. If you're used to using, you know, your notepad to give everyone a task list for the day, this doing it on your phone is a very different way of living, right? And so I think it's that transition piece that often is the most overwhelming for farmers, and having, you know, students or interns help with that onboarding can be really powerful.
Yeah, on my end, it's really just the help we need from educators is working with growers to perform their own on-farm variety trials. Because I think the best case scenario for using the vegetable variety navigator tool is to find 3, 4, 5 varieties that you think are most likely to succeed on your farm, and then actually testing those on your farm, as opposed to using the tool as a silver bullet to say, like, this is the variety for my farm, but using it as a way to winnow down the candidates.
All right. Seems like think that is, oh, did we just get one more question? I think we have, was it 2 minutes left or less? But let's see for let's see if this
Oh,
is
yeah.
one's quick. For Dr. Whitman, to the point of tech solutions going away, are there plans that allow farmers to self-host an instance of Light Farm instead of using your service if they wanted to? So
Yeah, they can
probably
already
be the
do that. So
last.
basically, you can go on the GitHub, you can fork it and set up your own instance. We don't like have technical support for that, but that's part of us being an open source app, is we want people to be able to play with their own and build functionality. We hope they do that with us so we can serve the broader team. But yeah, there's definitely that possibility. Yeah.
All
Yeah,
right.
I'm not the
Well,
tech savvy person. If you want details on that, you have to contact our product manager. But we actually keep track of how many forks there are, and there's quite a few. So it's happening already.
all right. Well, I think that was the last of the questions here, and I'd like to thank you all for coming here, and I'd like to thank all our guest speakers, Dr. Whitman and Dr. Wortman, once again, and thanks everyone for coming here. And if there's any other information you want to add, I feel free.
Okay. Well,
Great.
thanks for
Well,
hosting,
thanks so
Jack.
much, and thank you for having us.
Yep. I enjoyed it, Hannah. Thank you.
Okay, take care. Me too.
Thank you all.
Yeah, we use Seedlinked in our variety trial, so I was happy to see you give
Oh,
that a
cool.
shout.
Yeah.
Yeah, check out our Canovi project, Canadian Organic Vegetable Improvement. And we
Okay.
use Seedlink for all those results. So if you want to check it out online.
Okay. Yeah, I will. Thank you.
Okay.
Cool.
Ciao.
Bye,
Bye.
guys.